Greetings, nerds. This is SNN Nerd. I'm your host, Sarah Belmont, and with me, as always, is our Mr. Producer, Will Polk. How are you doing tonight, Will?
Doing very well, Sarah. How are you doing after a double dose of emotional overload yesterday?
Just anytime. And that other laugh that you hear is our special guest for this episode. He talked Infinity War with us, so of course he has to come back and talk Endgame. Pacing Pete is in the house. How are you doing tonight, Pete?
I'm still recovering from, just like you, Sarah, a double dose of watching Endgame yesterday afternoon and then watching Game of Thrones last night. I'm just like, I can't help but think of the GIF. Well, actually, not even the GIF. It's the scene in V for Vendetta when Natalie Portman's at her wit's end with V, and she says, "I can't feel anything anymore." That was me after yesterday.
I went through today like a zombie, a White Walker maybe, and not sure what I was excited more to talk about, Game of Thrones or Endgame, because they're pretty on par with one another. Mm-hmm. But I still can't get over the fact it made $357 million in 3 days domestically.
1.2 billion worldwide. That is insane.
It is.
They never thought it could be done.
So, yeah, we went going into the weekend, wondering what those domestic and global grosses are going to be. And the question was out there, could it catch Avatar's 2 billion mark? And given that, I don't see it a second weekend fall off. I mean, I think between repeat watchers and more buzz, it very well could catch Avatar.
Yeah, I mean, there is still people who haven't seen Endgame, even though it made $357 million. That's the crazy thing. And most of those people are like, yeah, I'm going to go next weekend. And I'm like, if you think next weekend is going to be like not as packed, then I don't know if I believe you anymore.
Yeah. Well, I mean, this movie is so ridiculously rewatchable. You're going to see so many repeat viewers next weekend and throughout the week. I mean, it's amazing how much money it's made and really like I've talked to a few people and just like, everyone's like, I can't wait to see it again, even though it emotionally broke me. Maybe I enjoyed pain, but everyone I've talked to is like totally down to see it like more than once. So.
Right. I also did the thing where leading up to my showing, I watched Infinity War.
I did the same.
And now that's an experience because I have to be honest, coming out of Endgame, I think I may like Infinity War more than Endgame, but then again, I still need to watch it a second time to give it its fair shake.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm glad I watched it, Infinity War again the night before going to see Endgame because it of course, refreshed my memory, but, whenever the film started and with the cold start and Cliff and his family playing ball and, teaching, his daughter how to be an archer and stuff, that just, already when that started, I was like, oh hell, I know, I wish I had brought a box of Kleenex because I don't know what's going to happen, but I'm going to be crying like a baby at some point in this movie, and I sure as hell did.
I am so dead inside. I didn't cry or tear up once while watching it.
Yeah, well, we know that, Sarah, so.
Sarah, what's it like to not have a soul?
I don't know. It's not like I killed myself to get the soul stone or anything, but I don't know why. I blame it on the writing choices personally, but whatever. So in talking about the beginning, I think I did myself more of a disservice watching Infinity War before going in, because watching that cold open, I was like, yeah, we know the snap happened. Moving on. I was really kind of like, I felt like maybe 10 minutes of that first opening act could have been cut. Because in my world, when the credit, when Avengers should have really popped up was right after they go and kill Thanos, literally, cut off his head, and Thor is walking away and you see it all turn white. Now, that is a transition point to say 5 years later, but I thought that the execution of that sequence from the moment Carol comes and saves Tony to Thor just being so brutal, and them still not being able to find a victory in it all, I would have chosen that moment to kind of be like, yeah, that's the cold open. Welcome to the show. It's Endgame.
Yeah, but I think the only thing is, if you did that and then went back to Cliff and his experience after the snap, it would have broken up the flow. With this,
I agree.
Yeah, so I think it was good the way it started. It does sort of set, it is a hard reset for everyone, which is probably, a good significant portion of the audience remembers what happened with the snap. But, it was good. Also, it just answers the question, what was Cliff doing? I mean, as far as the original 6, he's probably number 6 as far as like people think on the cool factor or whatever. But, that question was out there. And so we did get that answer as far as resetting the story, what's going on with the entire team. And so then to go to the Thor, day late, dollar short, chopping off, Thanos' head, beheading Thanos, and everything else. That was edit. To me, that was the better edit.
Yeah, I like the cold opening. I thought it set the tone for the rest of the movie, not just the rest of the movie, but for Hawkeye and eventually what happened between him and Black Widow. Was it Morag? No, Vormir.
Vormir.
And then also, like Will was saying, it kind of tied into like what happened to his character going on. Like, if we had never got that, I think not everyone would have assumed that he just kind of turned into some assassin or just some cold-blooded killer, taking out all these like cartels and yakuzas. I like that it showed that, even though it might come off a little redundant because obviously we saw that happen at the end of Infinity War. But it kind of gave us this perspective of what Hawkeye was going through, and I think it did explain like without that, I'm not sure we all would have bought. And now I guess I'm just speaking for myself. Like, I would have bought his emotion and his actions, everything he did going forward. Even when when they were testing, when they did the time travel test with him, when they had everything working perfectly, and they sent him in, he was the first one to say like, I'll do it. Like, he was so quick to do anything. They're testing time travel for the first time, and for all I know, he could have busted into a million particles. Anything could have badly happened. And so I thought that so I liked the cold open because it explained all of Hawkeye's motivations going forward. And then, like I said, ultimately what happens on Vormir.
Yeah, I like that you bring up his wanting to try to be the first tester of the time travel, because in thinking about it, what they did with his storyline is kind of also move Tony's trajectory forward, because you're able to parallel the man who lost everything after the snap with the man who gained a lot after the snap, and how both are kind of heading to this point of like, okay, really, what will it take, and what are they willing to give up in order to get back everything and also, or retain everything they have, but still make things right.
Mm-hmm. Right.
So Infinity War is about Thanos collecting the stones. Endgame is about the Avengers collecting the stones. Time travel rules out the window, and the rat saves the universe because the rat unleashed Scott Lang, Paul Rudd I think he he had I don't know who had more fun playing their character in this movie, Paul Rudd or Chris Hemsworth.
Yeah, it's hard. It's a hard call there.
Oh, no.
Ant-Man has always been the unsung hero of the MCU, and this film really, this film really shows why the Avengers as a team and as a unit are so strong. You know, it's like the old cliche, you know, a chain is as strong as its weakest link. And, you know, a lot of people would look at Scott as the weak link, but he was, obviously it was his happenstance that 5 years after the snap, it was a rat of all things to, you know, set things in motion to bring back the vanished. But, you know, throughout the movie, whether it was, you know, getting the Prem particles or, you know, testing time machine first or any number of places, Scott was, you know, he's that guy who just kind of accidentally like causes things to happen in a good way. And he's that member of the team, and you know, Paul Rudd just brings that energy and that enthusiasm to Scott Lang, and it really, again, given how weighty and the weight and the emotional weight of this film had, it was always good to have those moments of him and also Chris Hemsworth, the Thor, when they had those lighter moments that they brought into the story.
Like when Thor is retelling his relationship with Jane
Yes.
and how she got it affected by the ether, and the only one who was really engaged was Scott Lang.
Yeah.
His face was just priceless. Yeah. I don't know if I like that moment more than the moment when his tacos just get completely thrown out. And my only problem with that scene is I wish it had been orange slices to make it a callback to that line in Civil War where he asked for orange slices following the big airport showdown.
Yeah, that would have been a perfect callback.
Yeah. What about you, Pete? What are your thoughts on Scott or even Thor for that matter?
The big Thorowski. That was funny. I was not expecting Thor to completely fall off the deep end. And it's funny because I work with a coworker of mine. She's like totally in love with Chris Hemsworth. So she's like, she's going to watch Avengers this weekend, and she's all, I can't wait to watch like my man for 3 hours. And she's thinking of him like, you know, like Thor. And I've watched it and I'm like, she is in for quite a surprise. Oh man, it was funny. Just, I can't remember who it was, but somebody on Twitter said it was nice to wake up in the morning and see that my body type is exactly like Thor. Like I finally lived up to Thor in Avengers, and it was just so funny to see. He just kind of let everything go. You know, he gained a bit of a belly from all the beer, obviously, and I thought that was a funny change because you know, everyone had their different reactions to what had happened when they finally found Thanos, and he had the 5-year fast forward, and so it was interesting to see. It was I thought it was a funny take. I actually enjoyed Thor's who played more of like the comedic role in this one. You know, obviously he was just, and you saw that emotion come out when Banner and Rocket came to find him on New Asgard, and he was just, they bring up his name and they got like kind of we don't speak of that name thing going on. I'm totally gonna lose cred here, but what is that from?
Voldemort. They shall not be.
He should be named. Yep.
Yeah, and so you know, you kind of have that moment, and Thor, you know, breaks down a little bit, and you know, still feeling responsible for not going for the head back in Infinity War. Mm-hmm. You know, obviously chopping his head off in Endgame at the very beginning was a little bit too late. But you see where it all comes from. So a little bit of emotion there. And then, you know, I like the emotion he had carrying forward, you know, talking about Jane and then seeing his mom. You know, I'm jumping ahead a little bit here, but just touching on the emotion and how, like, he was able to balance, you know, being upset and then also bringing the funny. And I enjoyed that about Thor. I thought that was really a nice touch because Endgame is such a serious movie in terms of like what they need to do. And so it was nice to see, Thor become a bit more of a comic relief, because, Scott is so tied up in helping, everyone realize that time travel is possible through the quantum realm, and getting, Hank Pym's particles to get everything all working together. They didn't really have a comic relief, and there's something that's always there with Marvel in their movies, or there's some form of comic relief that does kind of balance the scales a little bit, and making Thor that was, I think, a pretty funny, pretty good move.
It's also very poignant to what they do with his character in Infinity War, because looking at these two movies as two halves of a whole, in Infinity War, he is very driven by, I'm a god, I'm a king, I have more power than any of you, I can survive this and I will. There's such so much ego that is driving him forward, that to then realize that he did fail and he didn't make the right decision, and he could have changed everybody's fate in that moment, but he chose wrong. Suddenly in this movie they humanize him, because this is what happens with a lot of people when they confront failure in their own lives. They go into depression, they put on the weight, they suddenly do make all the wrong decisions, because making any right ones got them nowhere to begin with, so who cares?
Yeah.
And in a way it kind of, yes, it was comic relief, but I think it set him up also to fill that void that was missing, because the snap took away Guardians of the Galaxy, and having that crew, like Drax especially, was missing in this movie for me. But having Thor, having Scott around, and even a little bit of Rocket seemed to be able to fill that void that was missing for the 3 hours.
Yeah, and also Banner, Banner Hulk.
Banner Hulk, yeah. There's some kind of hybrid name that I'm sure somebody has come up with to talk about whatever that was.
Professor Hulk.
Hulk? No, that sounds too much like the character from Power Rangers.
Yeah.
He was just like this kid, this jolly green giant, just walking around and eating pancakes.
Eating pancakes, taking selfies with kids, and those are the, they're talking about the evolution of the characters and stuff, and it's been so long since I think I've only watched The Incredible Hulk at Ed Norton one time, way back, I guess, 2009, I guess, when that one came out? 8?
I think it was like 2008. It was actually right after Iron Man.
Iron Man, it was like one of the early MCU movies.
That was the only time I need to go back and rewatch it, but just seeing how the character has evolved through the first Avengers movie, and get rid of the Hulk and get rid of this, and then we see the evolution in Ragnarok, where he's starting to become more at peace with the character, and then of course by Infinity War, and then of course in Infinity War he was like, talk about failure, Sarah, get to your point. I think it's where Thor's story was having the we see the impact of his failure as a bad thing. Hulk, on the other hand, his failure in Infinity War actually caused Banner and Hulk to finally reconcile with themselves, and then after the snap became this new hybrid being that is the best of both. And so it's, again, getting to your point, how the snap impacted the core six. We see a Banner Hulk who was like, afraid to come out and face Thanos, to one who is trying to do everything he can to get the stones back.
Yeah, absolutely. Like, he actually found peace in himself. And the line that I love so much is when, towards the end of the movie, when he talks about how whoever holds that gauntlet needs to have, it's all gamma. And it's kind of like he was made for this. Like, this was his destiny. So you do have a lot of those themes consistently portrayed with each character, and that's why the final act is as powerful as to make Will cry and me just maybe a little bit of goosebumps.
I'm not afraid to admit it.
And so let's, and I know we touched on it a little bit, but I still think like the biggest surprise in this episode is that Arya killed. Yes, spoiler alert. Arya kills the Night King, and I had more of a response to that than anything that happened in Endgame. I have to be clear. But the biggest surprise is the fact that Black Widow dies in Endgame, and it was funny. While they were talking about the pairing and who's going to which place, I'm like, well, whoever goes after the Soul Stone, you're going to get screwed because you have to do sacrifice. And then I realize it's Clint and Natasha, and I'm just like, okay, they better allow this moment for her. Because, not that I wanted to see her die, but I thought it would be such a scapegoat to allow Hawkeye to like take that moment in a way just because he has so much to lose, that it made more sense. And my only problem with the sequence is I think she should have, I keep comparing it to Infinity War with Gamora and Thanos, and that truly was an execution of sorts, and I don't think it should have that same betrayal. Like Cliff shouldn't have pushed her off of the ledge or anything.
Yeah,
right.
I just wish that they wouldn't have had so many moments where it's like, no, I'm going to take you down, and I'm going to do this. I'm going to take you.
Yeah.
That went on a little bit too long, I missed the emotional beat.
Yeah, it was a bit of a retcon of the whole Soul Stone mythos as far as how the stone's supposed to come back.
I agree, Sarah. I kind of had flashbacks to the Matrix Revolutions when Neo and Agent Smith are fighting, and by this time it's the third movie, we get it. They can't kill each other. Like, what's gonna happen? I was very much having those flashbacks when Natasha and Clint kept stopping each other. I'm like, somebody just like I'm like, something happened, because I think by the time Clint was over the edge, and then Natasha jumped on him and was hanging, I was like, okay, stop. I get it. Like, somebody, like, you both want to sacrifice. I get it. So that kind of became a little bit too much for me. But I agree with you. I'm glad they gave her that moment. Because it really was like, I wasn't sure how they were going to do, how these characters were going to react differently to things that happened, or who was going to lead, or who was going to take over the Avengers compound. And I thought it was awesome that, Natasha had, and she was really just in charge of everything. And she was really doing, like what they all said, whatever it takes. And I thought that really was a good moment. And I actually want to ask you guys a quick question here. And I have a bit of a hot take.
Yeah.
Maybe it's a hot take. I don't know. With what happened with Natasha on Vormir, we've seen her character fleshed out. We've seen, to me, that was just a fitting way to send her off, and they gave her moment, like you said, Sarah. I gotta ask, do we need a black movie now? Like, I don't think we do. Like,
do we need a black movie?
A Black Widow movie.
Yeah.
Black Widow. Did I say black? I thought I said Black Widow.
Yeah, I knew what you meant.
Okay, sorry. I don't know what the hell I was doing there. But do we need a Black Widow movie? Like, I feel like Marvel messed up a long time ago not giving her a solo movie. Like, they had plenty of opportunities to do it, and now they're doing it like when the boat's like completely sailed across the world twice. Like, I'm happy with the way that her story resolved at the end of her arc in Endgame. So I gotta tell you, I'm not really, I don't feel like I need to go to the movies and see her origin story. I feel like that time has passed. I don't know. What do you guys think?
And especially given, I think that the the time period, and I read it earlier today, and I'm blanking, but it's not even a full origin story. I think it happened either right after right before, maybe Winter Soldier. I mean, it happens in universe as far as.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so it's a prequel to subsequent events that happen in the current 10-year time loop. But I just can't remember I can't remember which film. So I agree with you. I know it's a hot take, but and I know obviously there are some people who do feel, okay, you killed the girl, and that usually happens, at least she made it to the end. But, that being said, it was a very satisfying, story to see, all the things we've learned about her throughout the journey, from throughout the 10 years of the MCU. So I do feel like they really did miss an opportunity for not having her own solo film before the Endgame.
I don't think it's a hot take. Well, that was the question, right?
Yeah, I just want to know if I'm crazy here.
No, I think actually there's a lot of people who would agree with you on that, Will and myself included, because the question you're posing is it needed? No, it's not needed. That being said, who knows? What Feige just accomplished, he can basically do anything. And the question will be, if they can make it work, will people go see it? Is it necessary? No, probably not. But for all we know, they could have a story in mind that'll send off will create this whole other plot thread, and suddenly you'll be invested in that. We don't know. I have to wait until I actually see the movie to be like, yeah, I'm glad they did that, or no, they shouldn't have done that. That's a misstep. But it's probably going to always be unnecessary. It's kind of what we talked about, Will, when we were reviewing Captain Marvel. I mean, is a prequel film really necessary? Watching it, I got a lot out of it, even though it was a prequel, and it did feel like so. Yeah, we've been there, we know this, we know that, but still, there was a story to be told, and they told it. So we just have to have faith in Feige, I guess.
Yeah, well, they've been batting 1,000, so, with these last few films. So,
yeah.
357 million.
Yeah.
Good point. Fair point.
We love them 3,000, if you may.
Yeah, there you go.
but I mean, why I think, oddly enough, even though I had a different reaction, I feel like this sacrifice worked more for me in comparison to the Gamora scene in Infinity War, is because of that scene between Black Widow and Cap towards the beginning of the movie, where she, just after hearing about Clinton, she breaks down and starts to cry, and then they're talking about how they're both responding and their different approaches, and she's fully invested to, if there is a way, we will find a way. And more importantly, that was just phase one of this crazy mission, is finding the stones and bringing them all back. What if they hadn't gotten a stone? Suddenly you sacrificed yourself for a plan that some other fool botched. That's a lot. And I can only imagine the pressure that suddenly builds on everybody else. But, and I like that it brought her redemption in a way. Like her doing that, she knows she's done a lot of bad stuff, like Red Ledger, read in her ledger, and I love how that's why this ending, even though nobody thought going in they would walk out saying like, man, she really did that, she self-sacrificed herself, but they set that up since Avengers 2, and with everything that she was doing.
Yeah. That's a very good point. I'm glad you brought that up. That sacrifice does make sense, because, and again, that's why I kind of joked. It's like, hey, the girl made it to the end, or the woman made it to the end, because if there were going to off the character, it could have easily been an Avengers 2, and based on the things that we learned about her in that film.
Mm-hmm. Now, this leads us to the other sacrifice that happens. So Will, we know you cried during Iron Man's death.
Yeah.
How did you feel about it?
Oh man, I was definitely emotional when Tony sacrificed himself, and it was heartbreaking because you had that moment before and when everyone's fighting and Peter goes up to Tony and he's like, oh my God, like, remember when I like got dusted and then like all of a sudden we showed up and Doctor Strange said, like was guiding us and you had Tony just like this look of relief that Peter is alive now and he's back, and you just felt it. Like I did. Like it just got to me. And so when you have the tables turned, only this time there's no coming back from this one. Like Tony's dying. And in that moment you see that with Peter, and then you see Pepper come over, and I think what for me got me was when Pepper said, "We're going to be all right." Obviously, referring to her and his daughter, and that just hit me hard, and it was just really so tragic to watch. But I mean, I actually think it was brilliant to bookend this entire Infinity Saga with Tony. The movie, he started the MCU. His character started this, and he finished it with his sacrifice, and I thought that was just so well done. And then the funeral happens, and that was really emotional. And then what hit me the hardest was when his daughter is sitting there with Happy, and he's like, "Oh, do you need anything?" And she goes, "I want a cheeseburger." And I just was like, "Oh my God, damn you, Russo!" Because that just totally took me back to Iron Man 1 when he got rescued, and he's in the car with Happy, and the first thing Happy asks him, "What do you want to do?" And he goes, "I want a cheeseburger. I want an American cheeseburger." And it did, just for me, just the emotions just overcame me, and I was like bawling like a baby. And I was just like, it was so good, so well done. And it just watching the evolution of his character and everything he's gone through, up to this point was just so really well done. I just loved it. And we're all going to miss RDJ as Iron Man. So I loved it.
Yeah, the line that got me was actually when Pepper comes over, forcibly removes Peter from the scene. I was like, "Hey kid, hey, I'm the love of his life. Back aside." You've known him for what, like a year?
Yeah, he's known him for a minute. Yeah.
So was when she said, "You can rest now."
Mm-hmm.
Oh yeah.
I thought that was so poignant, considering the conversation they have at the beginning as he contemplates whether he really wants to risk everything he's gained for getting Peter back, for getting back everyone else they lost, or more importantly, what his team lost. I mean, it's a very different Tony Stark that we meet at the beginning of this film than we've ever seen. I mean, of course, we keep saying that about a lot of these characters, but this is a family man. This is a man who likes to build forts with his daughter, play games, and it's family first. And yet, the moment they say time travel, it's kind of like, that's impossible. Or wait, I'm Tony Stark. I can figure this out. And he did figure it out. But I just like that, because the reality of that character is if he were to have lived on beyond this final chapter, we would always be wondering in any MCU film to follow, like, where is Tony Stark? Like, right. What does he have to say? Because he wouldn't. He couldn't do it. He wouldn't be able to turn off. Like, he very much is like Thanos in that way. Thanos is a character. He's not a villain. You can be like, oh, let's give him a second chance. Let's be redeeming. No. You have to annihilate him, remove him from the chessboard, or it's never game over.
Right.
Tony Stark's the same exact way, and so I thought that was great. This brings us to Captain of America, who didn't die in the movie, but it's very much a send-off, and it's a different form of sacrifice what they did, because he spent his entire life as a super soldier self-sacrificing, and so he stole back what was taken from him, because he's the one who volunteered, hey, I'll place the Infinity Stones back where they came from, and I'll be good. What a bunch of losers. You should have never believed him.
You never should have believed him, but to me that was the fitting end to that character, because obviously going into Endgame, we knowing that, at least out of universe, this was Chris Evans and Robert Downey Jr.'s last film, and so we figured, somebody was going to possibly die, and the way that the Russos did a tremendous job with the trailers, just, setting up like it was like that Cap was going to buy it, in the trailers, the way they, had the scene on the battlefield, him strapping up his shield one last time, which also, just a little side note, how the trailers in the film actually differ. The shield, of course, was actually broken in the final cut, but getting to his, it was fitting for his story, because since the time we were introduced to Cap and after he was on ice in the mid-40s during the war, he's always wanted to have that dance with this girl. He missed that dance with this girl. That's what we saw from the first Avenger. And so again, how Tony, of course, started the MCU and ended with Endgame. Cap, at least in universe, was indeed the very first Avenger, and he got his final rest by being able to go back and live the life that he had missed out on. So that was, for me, a very satisfying conclusion for Steve Rogers, and I figured out all the crazy time machinations after I had time to process it, and it works. So. Mm-hmm. So it indeed works, and he could do that.
Yeah, another reason why I stopped watching trailers after probably the first one, because I didn't recall seeing that scene with him alone on the battlefield, and there were a few moments where, especially when Thanos was like kicking his ass, America's ass, might I add.
Yeah, that's America's ass. Yep,
that's America's ass. That I was like, oh my God, they might actually kill off Cap, and that's kind of the launching point for everyone else to get their crap together and go kill Thanos. But no, it was a constant bait and switch, and I just, the moment he straps on the shield, but that's not the beautiful moment. Beautiful moments when, Cap, I'm on your left. And it's just, that was great. I mean, that's another wonderful thing about this movie. There's so many references that you're just overwhelmed with, like, no, I know what that means. I know what this means. I understand completely what's going on.
Captain America from the first Avenger movie.
Yeah. But I think what I really enjoyed about this film, it really felt like a love letter and a thank you to all of us who have gone on this journey. Because you're right. I mean, there were so many callbacks, there's so many references to so many things, and I'm sure each subsequent watching of this film, I'm gonna pick out another one that I missed the previous viewing. So it did have a very sad end as far as with Tony's and Black Widow's death, and that and they didn't cheapen it by doing the convenient Arrowverse out. I mean, this is final. And so, but it also was a love letter to the fans, and it was all the fan service for all of us sticking through this 11-year, 22-film journey.
Mm-hmm. I don't know about you guys, but something that did stand out to me, and I still don't know where I fall on it, because she is such a new character to this world. I don't think she should have had a lot more screen time, but I was just kind of a little bit surprised by, you see Captain Marvel early on save Tony, and then she disappears, and then she comes back in the final showdown, and I mean, she almost kicked Thanos' butt with the gauntlet on, which was pretty crazy. But I was just like, where's Captain Marvel? What's going on here, guys? She's clearly the strongest one of you.
Right. But Sarah, we talked about how they could right size her power, because, from when you saw Captain Marvel, it was just like, Thanos doesn't stand a chance. But I think the way they handled it by showing that the gauntlet not only impacted Earth, but it impacted so many other planets in the universe. And since she is essentially this Avenger who is the guardian of the universe, she was having to, and they even explained this in film, she was having to deal with the impact of the snap in other worlds where they had their snap. So she couldn't. So yes, if she had stayed there on Earth, I think clearly she would have single-handedly been able to end the story a lot sooner. But she was off basically trying to right things on other worlds because of the various snaps that happen in their backyard. So I think that was just a way that they had to right size her powers. Maybe not right size it, but just basically show the limits of her power, that she can't be everywhere at once and do everything at that one time.
Right. No, I think you're correct on that. I think my expectation for that character was for them to have kind of build that relationship where if she were to become the leader of the next set of Avengers, it would make a little bit more sense, because she's honoring. Because right now, the only person that for me it would make sense would be Peter, and that's just because, his father figure just self-sacrificed himself. And so he's kind of like, no, I got to step up now, like uphold this legacy. But we'll see. Nobody knows what's happening next. What else? What am I missing, guys? A lot more has happened.
I just wanted to chime in real quick about Captain America. I enjoyed his ending. I thought, like Will said, I thought it was fitting for his character. When you go back to First Avenger and you see how he never got to resolve things with Peggy, I'm glad that things worked out in the end. Also, shout out to MCU for finally acknowledging the television universe by connecting Jarvis, who was his dad's driver in, what was it, the 70s?
Yeah.
Who was also Peggy's, her, not, I wouldn't say assistant. I can't remember exactly what role he played to Peggy, but basically, that was like her, God, it's been so long since I've watched that show, but, it was like if Tony had the live version of Jarvis, like that was it for Peggy in like the 70s or whatever when they had the TV show. So that was cool to see. That was a nice little nod to the television universe, even if it had nothing to do with Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. or the Netflix shows, they did connect it a little bit there. But as far as Captain Marvel goes, when I wasn't like the biggest fan of the movie. I thought it was okay. I was curious to see how her character would be in Endgame, partly because, and I kind of feel about her the same way I felt about Doctor Strange. And the movie, Doctor Strange's solo movie just didn't hit me at all. Whereas his character in Infinity War was like my absolute favorite character in Infinity War. And so I kind of wondered if the same thing would happen with me, where Captain Marvel was like, I was just, I didn't really care much for her movie, but maybe she became my favorite character in Endgame. But my worry was like she would overtake things in the movie. That was kind of my concern, because I felt like closing the chapter, it really should focus on the original team, which I'm glad it did. But I felt like she came in when she needed to, and it wasn't necessarily like they didn't have a post-credit scene, obviously, for Endgame, but they threw little hints in there with, Captain Marvel and Spider-Man talking for the first time. Little hints of the new blood, as Tony put it earlier in Endgame. Like, they're going to be the ones that drive the MCU going forward. So I liked the little bit of screen time they had, because I think what they didn't want to do was overtake the original team, let them have their moment, but also pitch in such a big way as Captain Marvel did. Which, by the way, I think my favorite moment was when Thanos tried to headbutt her and she didn't even flinch, which was pretty awesome. But yeah, I think it was a nice setup for her, which I think she'll probably end up being the leader going forward. So I enjoyed the little bit we got of her, because it was just a tease. It was a taste of what is to come with her, and I hope that we see that going forward. I actually wanted to ask you guys a question. Something is bugging me, and Endgame, just like other MCU movies, is really good, but also has its flaws. But I'm not gonna nitpick on things. I will, though, however, question the time travel stuff, because, like Paul Rudd's character said, Scott Lang said in the movie, so Back to the Future was bullshit. Like,
yeah, it is.
I'm like, wait, what? Like, this can't be real. I don't know.
It took me like a day to figure this out, and so you have the Back to the Future, you have the grandfather paradox, you have time loops in Harry Potter, you have the butterfly effect, as far as like one thing happens, in other things. So the thing is, with this film, it was the quantum realm, and actually I was like, okay, this is bothering me too. So apparently and even in the movie, apparently there's a scientist who's a quantum physicist who's come up with this theory of the multi-universe. And in the quantum realm, basically, and they explain this too with, when the Ancient One talks about taking out the stone, creating the different timelines. So it's all about, with the quantum realm, it's all about probabilities. So, and everything, basically that was Tony's working out the equation that, okay, with the probabilities of retrieving all these individual stones at this particular point in time, he figured out that equation. So that's why whenever you have the various, so basically you have all these one continuity as far as time, and you can like basically, have the various, borrow the stones to be able to go to different points in time, and then instead of like rewriting the grandfather paradox or whatever, things, you don't know which way the things are going. So it's not like, with the grandfather paradox, things are always, if you go back and you kill the baby, which I even talked about, why don't we just kill Thanos? that in the grandfather paradox, you could do that, but with the quantum realm, if you did that, you would just create another new timeline that you could just travel on. So with the quantum realm, basically you have this multiple universe where, you could basically, you could basically take the stone out, do what you need to do, and then hopefully the probability of you going back to that right moment in time to reset the timeline is what they did. So that's why they were able to go into the quantum realm based off the probabilities that we will go to these fixed points of the day that we needed to get the various stones, do what they need to do, and then Cap basically, to preserve what they have known up to this point, he went back and just, again, by probability, was lucky enough to, reset things as they were. So that's why, for example, Gamora, at least the Gamora that was in the original timeline in the MCU, stayed dead. But of course, since they brought the new person forward, she could stay with them because there was no like, she jumped off of her universal timeline into theirs, and so she could basically stay. But of course, she has no recollection of her relationship with Quill or whatever, because in her universe, she's still there with Thanos and Nebula.
Yeah.
So it's all, that's how that quantum realm works. So that's why all those other time travel tropes were kicked out the window for this movie. And it does, and on some crazy level, it works.
It does. It just it kind of irked me a little bit because I do love Back to the Future, and I was I'm like Scott in that moment. Like, wait, Back to the Future is bullshit. And I thought that was really funny, but yeah, that makes total sense. But I guess, hey, they gave themselves an out with Loki disappearing, which I think that will probably, I have to assume that that's going to segue into his TV show that he's going to have on Disney Plus or Hulu or wherever they decide to put it on.
You're forgetting the biggest one that I took an issue with. Cap's time traveling at the end. So he gets married to Peggy Carter, and so did he make out with his daughter in the future?
No. So what Cap? No. So that was his grandniece, Emily Van Camp's character.
Still not making it okay.
No. Here's what happened with Cap. So remember Peggy never mentioned her husband's name. So, and she she always said, Captain America came back and saved 1,000, however many men it was that day in the
Big
first Avenger.
Going on right now.
But she, in 1970, whenever Steve and Tony went back to the military base, whose picture was on her desk? It was Steve's. So here, I think Steve went back to, and it works out because remember in First Avenger, the plane goes down, he's on ice. So that version of Captain America stays.
So what happened to Emily Van Camp's character?
She's still there. Basically,
and related to him.
Yeah, well.
So he did make out with his grandniece.
Well, the 1945 version made out with his grandniece.
It doesn't matter what version it was.
Yeah.
See how they created their own time travel thing, and the problem with it is it causes all these little continuity errors. And don't get me wrong, it doesn't change how I feel about the movie, but it causes all these little timeline problems when you try to redo time travel in this kind of way. Yeah, it worked, but then you have all these little things like Sarah just said. Oh, so he made out with his great granddaughter or whatever. Like,
and that's okay. It's Will's world, by the way.
Yeah, it does. There is some problems with it because obviously. The 2012, when the original Steve that, the Steve that went back from, 2023, he does make out with his niece. But
I always thought they looked alike.
Yeah.
Oh man.
But it could not be blood. It could be a niece from another, but anyway. But while Steve is on ice, basically that Steve doesn't wake up into the future. Current Steve goes back and he basically has the dance and they get married. He lives a quiet life. He doesn't, he probably takes an assumed name and, and he and Peggy live happily ever after.
Right. I mean, it's thin. I'll say it like that. The suspension of disbelief here is wearing thin, especially because in terms of a time travel movie, not only do you spend a good hour collecting all of the stones but which is also daring enough, but then to bring them back to the present time and be like, hey guys, FYI, we have to place all of these back. or else we really screwed everything up. So it's just the more of that, and then the moment where they lose one of them, and they even have to go back further.
But you're working under the Black to the Future, all those other time travel rules. In the quantum realm, those rules don't apply.
Oh, I'm sorry that I'm a moviegoer. Forgive me for having seen.
Yeah, like,
what do you mean?
I'm totally in the same boat as Sarah. Like,
How dare you?
I'll give them a pass, but I can't like pull myself away from that way of time travel thinking. Like, it's hard for me to do that. So while I gave them a pass, like, it's still kind of in the back of my head bug crap out of me that they did certain things that they shouldn't be allowed to get away with, but because the quantum realm allows for it, they can kind of ignore the thing. So I'll give it a pass. I'm not going to ignore it because time travel is one of my favorite things in movies. I'm going to let it go. Because I like the movie. I'm going to let it go.
So you're going to let go incest.
No, I didn't say that. Oh, boy. We're off the rails here.
Yeah.
As a quick question, what did you guys think of the cap-on-cap action we got when they did travel back in time?
Again. Okay. Well, I've already got beat up about the timelines, but anyway.
What?
No. Well, no, it's just, again, the quantum realm allows that to happen, and I loved it. I mean, even the end was the best, though, and that is America's ass, but.
Yeah. That was a funny moment.
Yeah.
Yeah, or I can do this all day. Yeah, I
Yeah.
know.
I know.
Yeah, I know. Yep.
Lucky's alive. What I really liked about that scene is for a moment there, I was just as confused as present day Cap, because Loki had done that flash of like pretending to be him, and so I was like, wait, is he facing who is he facing all of a sudden? Yeah.
No, that was a funny scene.
That was a funny scene. That was a funny moment. And also thinking about that scene in that moment too is just all the thinking back to how many characters and supporting characters were brought back for this film. When you consider Robert Redford's, is back and so many others that, even they were very integral to, the plot points in previous movies, but again, brought back for this film to basically tie the bow together and seeing all those characters, seeing the people again, to me, that was one of the things that, I really enjoyed about the film, beyond just the things we've talked about.
Yeah, it was I liked that. I liked bringing characters like that back. I thought it was a celebration of everything they've done the last 10 years with all these movies. It was just kind of tying a nice little bow on everything that was happening and how everything ended. And yeah, I loved it.
All right. Well, I think on that note, it's time to wrap up for tonight. Pete, thanks so much for joining us. Do you want to tell our listeners where they can find you?
You can find me on Twitter at PacingPete. I do some contributing work for Revenge of the Fans, so be sure to check them out. If you want to go on Twitter, go find me, and I'm always game to talk all things correctly done, time travel right. Which, by the way, 12 Monkeys did it the best. Go stream it on Hulu. Okay. Thanks, guys. This was fun.
And Will, where can our listeners find you?
Yeah, you can come at me with all your problems with the quantum realm at Will M. Polk. That's WILLMPOLK.
POLK. I'm just trying to make sure I have that on record so I can come to you and talk about incest now. You can find me at SJ Belmont, SJBELMONT. Please follow our crew on Twitter, at CNN Nerd. Friend us on Facebook, follow us on Instagram, but most importantly, rate, subscribe, and comment on iTunes, SoundCloud, YouTube, and Spotify. Good night, Geek Out. You're welcome.